Just looking at the time, I'm going to ask that we take just 2 more final questions, and then you can wrap up with the last 2, okay?
Thank you for your understanding.
And please be brief.
Yes, my name is Tendo Ramagoma. I am with the National Heritage Council of South Africa. And I get a sense that the source of this could be the cultural dynamics that are at play. And the question is, how do we embrace diversity against the backdrop of a lot of activities that are meant to resist the togetherness that we're talking about. Of course, we cannot legislate a new behavior. It's going to be difficult. Hence, you find that even when we go to national celebrations, it's only black faces that you will see. So there's no oneness that we are promoting. It's always going to be these blacks will always celebrate their freedoms and all that, which is a problem. It also manifests in the limitations that we have. When you look at settlement patterns, the moment you move to a suburb, all of a sudden all the houses will become predominantly black. You move to a white school, former Model C school, it's Sunnyside in Pretoria. After 2 years, it will become predominantly, if not 100%, black. You speak about the laws that are there. They are enabling to say, okay, you can adopt any other person, but you are yet to see a black person adopting a white family because of the cultural kind of dynamics that are at play. Recruitment patterns. You go to change your tire in a white-owned kind of establishment. The face of the person behind the desk and the supervisor will always be a white person, and the white people will always be, supervising. Are we saying that maybe government is not playing its role enough? Can we leave this to government to regulate the conduct of people? And also, I get a sense that there's an absence of a black voice. When something happens that exposes a black person as having done something that is anti maybe good morals and all that, then there's a white voice. AfriForum will be the first to speak on behalf of white, to promote white privilege. Pan-Africanism died somehow, and there's no voice to resuscitate that and speak for the blacks.
We have to wrap, unfortunately.
And also,
we have to wrap, unfortunately, sir. Thank you.
You see, freedom under law and all that, all those organizations that you see, when it's a black in the wrong, they always join in.
Yeah,
when it's black government in the wrong, they always join in.
Your point,
and not the other way around.
Can
we change that?
Thank you very much. One final comment.
Hi, my name is Zola, and I just want to talk about our transformative constitution, or supposedly so. And what this means to me is that there's an inherently loaded ideology. There is an agenda to transform, and it's also loaded with sunset clauses because the constitution drafters at the time recognized that moral convictions aren't static, that the institutions require change economically and infrastructure as well. However, there's some internal conflict, especially how media has been affected, where at one stage you want to promote freedom of speech, etc., and perhaps this is aided in social media and how competing narratives arise. But then you do get your penny sparrows. And I use the words competing narratives because without a lack of a state-endorsed sanction, it still exists as a competing narrative that is allowed. So my question, to be a little bit of a provocateur here, is it time then for the Constitution to enact one of its sunset clauses and take more radical steps in criminalizing racist actions, in criminalizing race denialism. And this goes back just a little bit to your point about, it's interesting how we talk about white race denialism, but I also have had discussions about black race denialism, i.e. black people cannot be racist. Now there's a similar model with Holocaust denialism. Is this a way we can change it? For me, ultimately, the increased trend for politics and the body politic and society to be awakened to the strength of the Constitution is a good thing. But are we at that place to make that shift where we can make the necessary trade-off between speech, freedom, and media in order to protect and push forward this anti-racism narrative? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to start with you because you were, and I'm going to ask each of you to be as brief as possible. We literally have about 10 minutes, okay?
Okay, I'll be as brief as possible. Let me start with his last question about, blacks, whether they can be racist or not. I'm one of those people that you can call a denialist. I believe black people can't be racist. Why? Racism is derived from privilege and a belief that you are supreme on the basis of your skin color only. I've yet to meet a black person who believes who believes in black supremacy, who walks around saying, I'm superior simply because I'm black. I'm superior compared to white people simply because I'm black. Black people, whenever they deny racism, they're merely reacting to racism by whites, because on the basis of privilege, on the basis of white supremacy. So you can't call a black person a racist. It's just one of those things that are said to deflect attention and say it's tit for tat, because Penny Sparrow is racist and you are also saying 1, 2, and 3. You are also a racist. You might as well just shut up, both of you. I refuse that kind of a narrative. So I'll leave the other questions to my colleagues here. The other question was around why are we classifying xenophobia as a black thing. I think that's, again, one of the follies on the part of the media. Because even there, you could see that it was not necessarily xenophobia, because xenophobia is described as hatred for foreigners. It was actually Afrophobia. It was just self-hate by black people. You look at someone who looks like yourself wandering around the streets of Joburg and go like, this is the one who's taking a job from me, and then you attack them. But the media, instead of interrogating that kind of narrative, to say, hang on, this is not xenophobia. This is just Afrophobia, it's self-hate. So the last question was about black pain versus white pain. I agree with the lady there that it's a global phenomenon. Wherever you go, even in America and other countries, the life of, or the tears of white people are usually taken seriously than the tears of black people. And it's just unfortunate that in the context of South Africa, given our history, we are still adopting that kind of counterproductive model.
Thank you.
Gosh, I think to your question about whether it's time to criminalize racism, I think that it is a question that perhaps needs debating, not particularly by media professionals, but I think by legal scholars, but also I think some of the people who were there at the at the writing of the Constitution, I think. Like I said, there seems to be some kind of vacuum where people are looking for some kind of consequence for racism that doesn't, it doesn't seem to exist right now. Or the consequence seems to be too soft. But I understand the kind of trajectory towards criminalizing it. I know that a lot of the objection to it stems from its a slippery slope towards criminalizing speech and puts limits on freedom of expression and things like that. This is why I think that perhaps the intricacies of this need to be discussed by legal scholars. But at the same time, I do agree that there needs to be some kind of consequence. But again, you know, I think then we become trapped once more in looking at racism only as isolated incidents that occur in a vacuum. And I think that I would rather, you know, that we begin to see what is contributing towards those, towards those actions, towards those utterances, and really towards that confidence to say these things on public platforms. And I think that we need to start unpacking that, and we need to start fighting really against that. And it's not going to be neat, and it's not going to be easy, and it's definitely going to require us to be very, strong about this. But certainly I don't think the status quo can remain.
Thank you. Angela, final word?
Mine's going to be quick. I'm uneasy about criminalizing because so much of what we've criminalized continues to be quite rife in our society. Sexual violence is highly criminalized. We have some of the most progressive legislation on it. That hasn't made it go away. So I'm uneasy about criminalizing seen as a solution to the problem, because I'm not certain that we have the means to police and make sure. You need something more than just criminalization. For me, anti-racism is work. It isn't just a profession of words. I mean, to quote the African-American poet Claudia Rankine, she says, "Nothing I can say can equal what my child sees me do in the world." Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. Nothing that I say can equal what my child sees me do in the world. And too often, there is this profession and use of words, it's the talking to, and people are chatting. But their work is different. And this takes us back to Justice's first point. What happens at the end of this? Have we spoken? Are we doing different things? Are we doing things differently? And for me, anti-racism has become a posture instead of the actual daily grind and work that it is. As an individual, to quote Mogoeng, doing deep introspection, but also inside our organizations and our institutions. And some of that is going to be piecemeal. You cannot fight every battle all day, every day. I'm sorry, I like pleasure. There are things I like doing that don't involve me fighting with people. Right? And so that idea of the way culture works. I'm not particularly interested in using race to make sense of the world. It isn't for me productive. I'm interested in explaining to myself why people are using race in the world when race has no scientific, veridical, biological status. It isn't real, but people use it. It would be the same reason I wouldn't believe in going to a house to exorcise a ghost. But I would be interested to ask myself, why do these people behave in the way that they do, believing in a ghost that haunts them? What is it that I don't believe in, that has no veridical scientific status, that allows them to behave in the way they do? Before I even begin to think of how to help them and empower them to behave in the world better or differently. Whereas I think for a lot of the time, people are looking for solutions through this thing that doesn't exist.
Thank you. Justice?
I think the solutions that you talk about, we've created the space to achieve these solutions. So when you talk about the Constitution and what it can do, whether we should criminalize racism or racist acts, I think we have the political space, the political power to have a debate and say what next, instead of sitting and talking about it and not doing anything about it. So I'm interested in where the ANC process to criminalize racism and racist acts will take us in the debates that happen in Parliament. And then let's have it and let's see whether we can implement those things, whether we can actually convict anyone for some of these acts that happen. So for me, it's what do you do with the spaces that have been created since 1994? And I sometimes feel that we don't take advantage enough of them. If you say, what are the solutions to some of these challenges? I have to say, I mean, Pete, for example, you say the top 4 are still white, the top 4 newspaper groups. Well, actually, they're not. The independent newspapers, there was a big debate with the PIC yesterday. It's owned by Iqbal Suve. He is front and center in charge of that newspaper group. Surely, if we're talking about transformation and transformation at ownership level, there it's happened. What next? What is the meaning of transformation there, and disrupting some of these old style practices that lead to these skewed narratives? I think we should acknowledge that change has happened there. Is it positive? Is it negative? I have my own views on it, and let's use that to move, to build on something. Let's not say it hasn't changed. I think there has been some serious changes at independent newspapers. If we think about the power that we have in the media, the SABC is run by a CEO, I can't remember, but the COO is the gentleman who's been in the news for a long time. Now, you know, the executives, the executive structure at the SABC, the board, the whole edifice of the SABC is black. If we say, let's talk about transformation, let's make that transformation straight from just a racial transformation to a meaningful transformation that says, what's a public protector? Sorry, what's a public broadcaster? And what does it mean? How does it behave? What does it say about the gentleman who kills 4 of his children? And why isn't that being reported on? So let's make it meaningful. And I sometimes worry that, particularly when we debate race in South Africa, we don't take advantage enough of the fact that there is so much to exploit, and we don't exploit it enough. If you have a conversation about transformation at ENCA, where I go, where you go, why is it that we don't take advantage of the space that this is a business that's owned more than 30% by a trade union, and we don't talk about what is the meaning of that, and so it's, oh, you know, it's untransformed or whatever. Well, I mean, isn't it time to do something about it, given the space of a fundamentally politically changed country, and use those spaces? So I'd really like to see more of that kind of discussion entering the space of these debates, rather than ANN7 is black owned. Mabengela Investments is 35% owned by President Zuma's son, who is black.
I'm
done.
Are you throwing the mic down? Thank you.
Can I have a parting shot? No, I wanted to respond to what Angela said regarding the reason why people are not suing
30
Alan.
seconds.
Yeah. He said the reason is because he would sue because he's got a lot of money. To be honest, I actually differ with him, because we've had a lot of people taking President Jacob Zuma to court for years, defending cartoons against him, spending millions of rands. You know, you take someone who has got a bottomless pit of money from the treasury to defend himself and sue you. You take him head on, and then you defend yourself. If you can spend money on that, you can also defend yourself against Alan Craig.
Alan, not Craig.
Exactly, if you want.
Thank you very much. I know. We'll talk about it afterwards. Let's give a round of applause, please, to our panel.
Let me say a big thanks to Siki. I hear your voice every day, and
Great.
it's like you related to me. So thanks very much. I really want to say how, sitting at the back there, the goosebumps just kept coming and coming, wave after wave, and to say to you that the purpose behind this particular set of dialogues has been, I think, vindicated in the way in which this discussion has played itself out here. It's done 2 things, and I want to emphasize that. The first thing is that it's done is, and I wish I was articulate as Angela, it's put this big question of what we know. And I've tried to write about this. So we know a lot about race and racism. You'll see we've called this whole process racism and not race. We know a lot about race. It's extraordinary how much we now have come to understand. in sociology, in genetics, in a whole range of fields, that this thing about race is utter nonsense. And it's an extraordinary body of knowledge by itself. And yet we behave every single day, we look at each other and we kind of do that simple thing which our parents taught us badly, be careful. And we really have to work extremely hard. And this is the point about an exercise like this. How do we take what we know, and it's not just race, it's also gender. And in gender it's even worse. It's how do we take what we know and make it meaningful in our lives? So that knowing is not just a theoretical thing, but a thing which you live. Okay? How do you make something that you know so consequential that every single moment of your life, it's hard work, as Angela says, every single moment of your life that I'm going to look at all of you and make no presumptions whatsoever. None. Comes on for more than 300 years. I mean, what this empire that our colleagues on the platform are talking about is that over 300 years you have been told that black people like such. If you look at a person who has black skin, you can begin to tumble off the tip of your tongue all kinds of things about what black people are all about. And we have systematically absorbed that in all of the spaces of our lives, and particularly in the academy. The universities have been teaching bad sociology, bad anthropology for the last 100 years, in ways in which all of us just sit there and take it in. And we're now having to turn all of that around because, and it's really difficult because it's been embodied in legislation, it's been embodied in rules, it's been embodied in etiquette, it's been embodied in fashion. I'm absolutely tired of the ways in which particular forms of expression, and hair, of course, is the big thing, come to be fetishized by everybody, blacks and whites. We have absolute fetishes about our hair. And we have to undo that. We have to unlearn that. We have to go through this really hard thing, and it's hard work, and you're not going to change it simply by passing a law. And the most important thing I want to say to each of us is that it demands personal politics, and it begins with you right now. Right now, when you walk out of the room, you think about the consequences. You're going to be going into a traffic intersection there, and somebody's going to drive aggressively, and how are you going to respond? How? I'm telling you, you're going to respond with your skin. And we've got to turn all of that around. And it's the work of all of us which these dialogues are all about. It's about how you bring the evidence, the best evidence of what we know, and put it in front of us and talk to it in ways that are relatively sexy. So how do you bring a subject like this and bring all of us alive, and so that we don't feel we're being in a stuffy lecture room and being told how to behave? I mean, how do we do that? How do we take this really difficult stuff? And I'll tell you, it's around the stuff of gender, it's even more difficult. How do you get around your head that boys don't need to be particularly brought up in the ways in which we think that they need to be? How do we get around that real difficulty? So I'm saying to all of us, colleagues, we need dialogues around gender. Major dialogues around the stuff of gender. So that's the one point that I wanted to make. The other point that I want to make, and I want to thank Pitt, we have to come to terms with what these last 300 years of our lives have meant. These last 300 years of our lives have damaged people around the world, not just here, around the world. And I'm exceptionalizing racism here now for a moment. I think patriarchy is worse, but I just want to exceptionalize racism for a moment. Civilization has built into it black pain. And we've got to find ways of getting out of it, of responding to it, responding to this real emotional substrate which is just there. It's like there. You know, you just scratch it a little bit and you will find it. And we've got to engage with the meaning of black pain beyond these kinds of rhetorical kinds of ways in which we are engaging with it right now. To the point where all of these rhetorical devices around it, which put up prohibitions and permissions, you can do this, you can do that, I can say this, you can't say that, and so on. We've got to get to the point where we all have the confidence as human beings that we can enter each other's spaces with respect. The same with gender. I mean, how do we enter each other's social spaces with respect? And it's an extraordinarily difficult thing because we are going to make mistakes repeatedly. I think I'm relatively educated around these things. I imagine myself to be relatively aware of how these things work. I think that my antennae have gotten to the point where my instincts are such that I will try and listen very carefully for the words that I use. But it's a really hard thing. But we have to enter that space, and it's the space that we in the HSRC are required to enter. We have to enter it. We have to try and talk about black pain. And I hope that when we've done with that, we will also talk about the pain that women go through in these incredible ways in which they get positioned every single day of their lives. People with different kinds of sexualities and so on, that we can enter those kinds of pain too. That we can enter the pain of people who have different forms of ability. We can come to a sense of what those are all about. So I want to thank you all. I want to thank Siki. And I hope that, you know, all of you colleagues will be following these next few debates also. And I'm hoping that they fulfill some of this function of putting difficult stuff in front of us and finding ways in which we can walk away here saying it's actually quite all right to be talking about difficult stuff here. I don't really need to reach for my castle light. You know, it's quite okay to be an intellectual. So I'm very thankful to you and appreciate what you're doing here for us. And I really want to say, colleagues, it's been great having you all here. Some of you I know have come from a long way. Thank you very much.
So thank you, everyone. I'm just going to end with 3 comments, some thank yous, an apology, and then a note about food. And I think the last is the one that you're all most interested in. But to say thank you to Siggy and our wonderful panel, I think Crane summed it up well. I think you really allowed the space, allowed all of us to, I think we all leave here, not with answers, but I think with challenges. And I think that for me that's an important outcome of the debate. Challenges on how do we do this differently, individually in our own lives. So thank you very, very much to all of you for your inputs, your consideration and your thought. We do have some gifts to hand over. If I can just ask one of my colleagues just to, Belang will come forward just to hand over just a thank you gift from the HSRC for your time and your effort and valued participation.
Is it one they have to declare to their editors?
The only thing you have to declare is the castle light. We put a castle light at the bottom of all of those bags.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. you very
So
much.
please, let's give them a round of applause, everyone.